Hoskins Sotutu is a player that might one day appear at number 8 for England. Is that a genuine interest that you have in him?
Well, he's got to show an interest in us, mate. And the way he can show interest in us, if he wants to come and play club rugby in England, if he wants to come and do that, we'll be very interested in him. If he's not, then it'll be one of those nice things you can talk about at a pub. Could he play for? Could he be in England number 8? And that's the only value of that conversation at the moment until he makes a decision to come to England and play club rugby.
Eddie, congratulations on winning the Rugby Book of the Year. What does it mean to you to know that your book and your story has been so well received?
Well, firstly, I'm really pleased for the publishers, Macmillan, and for the writer, Don McRae, who did such a great job in putting the book together. And they've told a good story. I didn't have much of a role to play in it, mate, but it's nice that people have enjoyed the book and hopefully they've got something out of it.
One of the fascinating aspects as well about your growing years was the fact that you played rugby from a very young age with the Ella brothers, Mark, Glenn, Gary. You spoke about the courage and desire that those guys had when they played. How much has that been a driving force in getting players that play for you, that you try to emulate that desire and courage again?
Well, I think that, there's a couple of things that back then, for the Aboriginals, it was difficult. And for them to be successful, they almost had to separate themselves from their Aboriginal community. So that took a lot of courage to do that, to be themselves, to fight for who they are. And I was lucky. When I think back, I was so privileged that I went to a school, a primary school that had 30% Aboriginal kids. And then I remember our high school had a similar population. Then I remember going to Sydney Uni, which is quite a established university, and most of the kids had come from big public schools. And they had no awareness or no understanding of the Aboriginal race. And I feel so lucky that I had that experience and particularly with those 3 boys. Not only was it a great sort of life experience, it meant that you won every game you played in, which is pretty useful when you're a kid.
One of the most moving chapters in the whole book, not surprisingly, was life-changing moments. And you suffered a stroke, as we all know, back in 2013, and people often asked you if it changed you, and you said you became less intense and learned to relax more. Is that still the case today, 7 years later? Because it does seem that you're very focused and very driven to succeed.
Yeah, I think I've become more understanding of other people. I think that's what led me, because I wanted everyone to be as driven as I was, and I couldn't understand if they weren't. And I think having the stroke made me realise that I wasn't Superman. That there was ways I could get beaten. So I think I've got a better understanding of people now, particularly staff members. I think because not everyone has the same obsession that I have for sport, and you need to understand that there's different levels, and I think I understand that a little bit better now.
Also in that chapter, you speak of the day that your dad sadly passed away and the reflection of what your family means to you. How difficult has it been to balance life and work when operating at the level of international sport that you have been at for so long?
Yeah, it's never easy, mate. Something gives. You got to give more time to one area. I was just speaking to a guy last night who's married to a Japanese lady, same as me, and he's got a young daughter. She's 10 years old, and I said, "You're so lucky to have this time now to be at home with your daughter," because one of the regrets I have, I didn't spend enough time with my daughter in those formative years, particularly in her teenage years when they need you at home. I was chasing my career, and it's the one regret I have, and you never get that time back.
It's also clear that in life, as a coach especially, you're always learning, And you speak of acquiring information, tactics from the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson, Louis van Gaal, etc. But in particular, you were really taken by Pep Guardiola. What was it about him that struck such a chord with you?
I was just watching him today, mate. They beat Newcastle 5-0, hey? But I could sense his frustration that the team's not operating as well as he'd like. And that was the thing that I really enjoyed about him. He had such a desire to be the best. He was so keen to learn about how he could play the game of football better. And he had studied chess, he'd studied handball, he'd studied rugby, he'd studied every invasion sport to see how he could improve the way he could coach football. And it was just opened up another opportunity to learn. And as I said, I'm fascinated to watch him all the time because you can feel his desire to keep on wanting to get better. And at the moment, the team's probably stalling a little bit.
At the end of the book, and obviously there are loads of rugby matches and incidents that we could talk about, but time is always not on our side. But you reflect on the World Cup final defeat last year, and it brings you to talk about the potential of the England team. We know that you've signed a contract with England to 2023 World Cup in France. What specifically is it about the challenge of taking this England team to the next World Cup that inspires you?
Well, I think it's always difficult after you've been to a final to keep going, because what happens is that you think you've done okay, but the other 18 teams of the World Cup think they haven't done okay, and then they've got that drive and desire to want to get better. And my challenge is to make sure that this group of players, and then bring new players through, can be as hungry and as desirous as the other 18 sides that missed out at the last World Cup, because history shows a team that's get beaten in the final, generally the next World Cup, they don't make it past the quarterfinal. So that's a fantastic challenge to have.
I read a quote somewhere saying that you also would love this England team to be recognised as one of the greatest the game has ever seen. Was that quite accurate?
Yeah, no. We want to play rugby that people remember. When you go into the pub and in 10 years' time, Rishi, you sit down and you say, what do you remember? What rugby team do you remember? And I want you to say the England 2023 team. That's how you want to play the sport. You want to play it at the highest level. And again, you go back to having played with the Ellers. I've experienced the game at the highest level. I've seen it, and there's no reason why we can't do it.
I'm going to remember that quote. Obviously, the rugby world continues, as you say, and there's lots of discussion going on about one thing or another. Just to ask you a couple of questions about some of the issues. I'm sure you're aware the RFU are conducting a review of the singing of Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Do you have a view on whether England fans should continue singing it, not singing it, or whether they need to be educated about the origins?
Well, I think it's always about education. I think awareness and education in these sort of matters are crucial, and it's very much an individual matter, but certainly I think education is the key going forward.
One other discussion point that's been in the news recently, particularly relating to Manu Tuilagi, is the fact that the RFU's stance is that England players must be home-based. What's your view on that?
Yeah, look, that's the situation in England. It's best for the whole England environment for that rule to be in place, and I'm happy to abide by it. I think it helps the clubs retain their players, and we need a healthy domestic club competition. So I can understand the rationale behind it.
Slightly indulging as an England fan, I've been reading that Hoskins Sotutu is a player that might one day appear at number 8 for England. Is that a genuine interest that you have in him?
Well, he's got to show an interest in us, mate. And the way he can show interest in us, if he wants to come and play club rugby in England, if he wants to come and do that, we'll be very interested in him. If he's not, then it'll be one of those nice things you can again talk about at a pub. Could he play could he be in England number 8? And that's the only value of that conversation at the moment until he makes a decision to come to England and play club rugby.
there's a lot of pub chat going on here. And with that in mind, the last thing I'm going to ask you, Eddie, is about the fact that you and Warren Gatlin have shared a bit of banter over the years. And of course, his book was also up for this award, but your book, My Life and Rugby, has beaten him to that. How much will you enjoy the bragging rights for that?
I don't think so, mate. No, yeah, Warren and I have got a really good relationship. We have a bit of fun in the media. Yeah, you just look at what he did in the Northern Hemisphere with Wales. He did a fantastic job, and now he's back, and I think he's doing a great thing back in New Zealand, going back to his original hometown team and trying to revive their fortune. So he's a good rugby man.
Well, Eddie, I don't want to keep you any longer. It's been lovely to chat to you. Congratulations on the book. Congratulations on the extension of the England contract. 2023 World Cup final. I look forward to chatting in a pub afterwards about England being one of the greatest teams we've ever seen. Eddie Jones, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rishi. Thanks very much.